Hey, Scott, why don't you text me after this thing's done instead of now?
Just making sure the glare off my newly shaved head was all right. So all right. So
Good evening once again, wonderful people. Welcome to another Light 'em Up live session. We just went live on Facebook as well, so hello to everybody who's joining us over there. As always, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments underneath the Facebook posting here at the lounge. Let me know you've got questions, unmute yourself, make your questions being heard. I'm beyond grateful and honored that Darren Cioffi is joining us tonight as our special guest, master blender and founder of Principle Cigars. Darren, such a pleasure to have you. Welcome.
Here's mine, Reinhard. Very happy to be here.
Now, Darren, let me ask you this. In a time that is fast-paced, you have become a world champion in doing something superbly slowly. And when everybody is just trying to figure out what's the next big thing, you're massively into antiques. Are you just trying to go against the grain, or is there something about the past that just fascinates you?
No, I guess I just like what I like. I mean, it's not so much that I'm interested in things from the past. I'm just interested in things of quality. And, you know, a lot of those things seem to emerge from times ago rather than today. You know, we're all cigar smokers, so we're all into some sort of slower, more Epicurean lifestyle. And for me, antiques and vintage art has always just been something that was in line with that. In fact, you know, I'm in the cigar business because antiques led me there.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure you've told this story like 100 times. Maybe there's a couple of people who do not know your background or where you were coming from, but maybe give us a little rundown of how you first got into antiques, the antique papers, some of these beautiful old cigar labels. I mean, your Instagram is full of mesmerizing pictures, and you just had a week, I think, where you posted old cigar boxes, right, and cases. Beautiful.
Yeah, we did pictures. Yeah. Well, I'll try to keep it short rather than bore everyone, but I was always dealing in antiques since high school, and when I was about a sophomore or junior, I rented a little portion of an antique shop where I lived on Long Island. And then I started selling in New York City at the old Annex Antique Market, which just finally closed after many years. And I would go to Pennsylvania looking for things to sell during the week. You know, my mother would drive me down, and there were certain auctions we would attend. And one day we were just driving past a shop. She suggested that I go in, and it was an old paper shop. And one thing the guy had was a lot of old labels, meaning, you know, product labels that were never actually put on the boxes. And in particular, he had cigar labels. So these are the labels you would see on the inside of an old cigar box, only ones that were never actually applied. And I bought a lot of the labels from the guy. You know, I thought they were spectacular. You know, these things were 100 years old. They were stone lithographs. The subject matter was amazing. But I didn't realize how important they were. And I became immersed in this. You know, I started spending all of my money and time finding labels. I was quite young, but I started going to Europe, buying up all the labels I could find there, and the same thing in the Caribbean. And just from doing this, at some point, I started smoking cigars, since I was around so many people that were cigar smokers, also interested in this sort of thing. I had begun dealing in vintage cigars at that time, but only because I had access to really early stuff through the antique trade. You know, I was buying boxes. Our library today has boxes from the 1870s through the 1930s, you know, a huge inventory of really early stuff. And at some point I realized people were smoking these things as well. So I kind of made the shift from art only to vintage cigars, to smoking cigars, to eventually I started nudging the blends or trying to influence the production of what I was smoking. And yeah, one thing led to another, and the path ended up in the cigar industry.
Now, as you mentioned, you now got your own cigar brand, which is quite a big thing to accomplish. But for you, it's sort of a side hustle, right? Now, you being the master blender, it's not just setting up the business, but it's also really about your palate and the sensory component that you're bringing to the table. When did you actually realize that it wasn't just your love for antiques, but also your sensory capabilities that would bring you deeper into the whole cigar industry?
Well, it's all sort of the same thing, right? If you appreciate aesthetics, you're probably going to appreciate things that are tantalizing the other senses as well. And I mean, if you follow my Instagram, you see all I do is a lot of eating and posting food pictures. And cigars are really no different. It's like anything. I remember starting in wine years ago when, you can't really tell one thing from another. And then the more you taste, suddenly things start to click, right? Suddenly, okay, I can recognize South African wines, or suddenly I can recognize these grapes, and it just starts forming more and more. And cigars are really no different. It's just continuous exposure to certain things. At some point things click. And certain elements are more and less important when you're blending cigars in terms of flavor profile and complexity and all that, because not everyone has reached that level. And that's not to say that people that haven't reached it are not enjoying the product as well. I mean, you don't have to be a level 3 som to enjoy wine, right? So you want to blend cigars with that in mind, that some of your customers are not going to have the palate that you're going to have. And but I always say you're keeping the focus on the fact that you're blending cigars for 5% of your customers. 5% of the people you smoke cigars maybe are at that level and can have that conversation with you about the intricacies and the minutia of what they're tasting. But if you do that correctly, you'll also appease the other 95%.
I was curious. You started at the very early beginning to sort of, carve your path as an entrepreneur, because it was, I think, in late high school when you started dealing with antiques, right? Did you always have that entrepreneurial spirit in you, or was it something that came naturally to you through your family or your upbringing?
No, to this day, my mother will drop a comment about how I should get a job or something, so that I have health insurance or some nonsense. I mean, literally, no level of success, I think, will put in their mind that, this is okay. So I had the opposite drilled into me, and maybe on some level that helped me in having the, lack of fear to just go ahead and be my own person. But I think because of the way and I don't want to, my parents were extremely supportive. So even though my mother, for example, would always say things like this, she was the same person driving me around to auctions to buy stuff. And, they're supporting my activities. So they were great parents in that sense. But I know in their mind, they're just not from a world where they understand that what being an entrepreneur is. And whereas I'm the opposite. It's all I know. Did that answer your question? I forget where you started.
Yeah, yes, it sort of did. But what does that mean to you, actually, being an entrepreneur? And like, you tried a couple of things, obviously, starting with the antiques first, but then venturing into the cigars.
I hate the word entrepreneur, right? Like, because at the end of the day, I rarely use it. It's just, we're all in this world just trying to survive, right? You have to go out and get something and bring it home. And whether that's going to work for someone else and take profit from that, or whether that's buying and selling something on your own, or killing and dragging something home. I mean, we're all really doing the same thing. It's just the methodology, it's just go out there, get something, take it back and eat it. And, when I was young, I looked at big companies and people working so hard for these companies, giving up their entire lives, and they're doing so much activity. So a company can make an enormous amount of money and they're just taking a tiny piece. Well, why not just get closer to that end transaction and take a smaller piece, but just for yourself? It has to be better. I mean, this is a bit abstract, but that's kind of how I always looked at it.
I still remember when we first met in Austria, in Vienna. It was on a beautiful rooftop bar, and it was a certain gentleman called Kolja who introduced us to each other. But it was a fascinating moment for me. I mean, the surroundings were beautiful, and it was the first time that I ever got to smoke one of your beautiful cigars. And I guess everybody who has smoked a Principle cigar in their life is very happy that you decided to go into that business much rather than shooting and dragging something home, as you mentioned. Job when you were young and when you when you grew up? Like, was there ever the firefighter dream, or was it really the antiques thing that started to spark your interest at a super early age?
Uh, I'm sorry. What was the final question? You went out there for the wind.
I'm sorry, was it too windy? It
Yeah,
just
just
up
I
here.
did the very end. You said what was the final question? You said.
What your early dream job was, or if
Ah.
you sort of had like a dream job in those early days.
I mean, I remember silly things when I was really a small child, but as a young, I was doing acting for a while. I did some commercials and things, and so there was a brief moment in my life when I thought that might be my career path. But no, I had no real aspirations. I mean, I suppose if I would follow a direction that was more money oriented, but I would still be doing what I love, which is the antiques and cigars. You know, I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to live and eat from them. But you know, if I was doing something else for financial reasons, I probably would be still doing these things as vigorously as I am now. And luckily, I spend most of my time on these two things.
Do you feel the same way about Principle as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably an old paper person first and a cigar guy second, but that's not to diminish the importance of the cigars. I mean, I probably spend more time doing things related to cigars than old paper. But they're both what make me up and I think important, and they're so related.
And what I realized is just the loving care and the attention to detail that you bring to the table when it comes to your cigars. Um, where 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 does that come from, or what is that one thing that really inspires you to do things differently with Principle than all the other companies that are out there?
Well, we're all going to be dead soon, and so there's no sense in just messing around with this stuff, right? If we're going to do it, we might as well do it appropriately. And it's just like being interested in, like I talk about the labels and the amount of attention and quality that went into literally the finest color printing that the world has ever seen. It's the same thing with cigars. I mean, you know, we don't make huge runs of cigars. We're making really small craft productions, right? The tobacco that we're using, like aviators, for example, the youngest tobacco is 4 years old, and that's not an exaggeration. Almost everything is in that 4 to 6 range. The Brindille, the new production, the binder is 12 years old, probably more like 13 years old now on this Banao. You know, that's unheard of for big companies, but we can do it with the tiny production levels that we have. And especially at the factory that these come out of, KBF, it's impossible to make a bad cigar, uh, but it's also possible with some care to make some really exceptional cigars. I mean, we make cigars that are very vibrant, and you know, I'm always trying other things, and oftentimes I have, especially on these Ami Cigar Zoom meetings, you know, I'll light something up that I've been saving for a while, and you know, I'm constantly disappointed by stuff. And then I'll usually light one of my cigars as the second cigar because my palate's a little bit more tired. And, you know, it's been reassuring because it's having that AB experience with sort of high quality, but still production level cigars, and something that someone's making in really small quantities with great care and attention. The difference is evident. And I'm not like the only guy. I mean, there's plenty of awesome stuff out there, but when you're faced with the option of, look, 4% of people smoke cigars, right? We're living in a world where these, you know, even ultra premium cigars maybe start at $10. My aviators are between $10 and $25, and there's a cigars in production runs of 3,000 sticks. So you can get an ultra high quality product out there for not a lot of money. If 50% of people smoke cigars, they would probably start at 200 a stick, and that would be a mass produced cigar, right? Like, we are fortunate enough that we are interested in something that so few people are into. You know, you've heard over and over again, 200 hands touch this thing before it gets to the final consumer. I mean, this is a labor intensive, super rare product. And only because of the fact that the global interest is so small, we're able to enjoy this affordable luxury for really does not amount to a lot of money.
How do you go about creating new cigars or additions to a line that you already have? Maybe starting a new one. Is it the idea first, or do you have a certain aroma and flavor picture in mind that you're trying to work towards?
Well, if I'm blending, it's there's definitely an endpoint in mind, but at the same time, I had one professor one time that in the beginning of this grad school class, he said to us, you know, you can't have specific goals. You have to have uh, a general idea of where you want to go is nice. But if you have too specific of a goal, you're going to ignore opportunities along the way. And blending is like that too. I mean, you might say, okay, here, this is where I want to end up. This is my end point. But if you discover something wonderful along the way, you want to be able to explore that. And, you know, you're all okay, we have a lot of ability and a huge tobacco library, but we're still working within certain constraints. And as is every factory or blender, you know, if you're too specific about where you want to go and you don't have the ability to go to that exact point, but maybe you have the ability to go somewhere better, but a little bit different, you'd be crazy not to explore that. And I see blending is no different than life in that sense. You know, from a branding point of view, it's a bit different. Yeah, we might have more of an end point in mind. But the other thing is, you know, we're not dealing, this is not like cooking or baking. You know, cigars it's such a living, breathing, dynamic product. The tobacco is dynamic. The process is dynamic. You know, the way you're experiencing it is going to be different. This tastes different to me now than it did yesterday because of the, you know, the weather here or the people I'm with or what I'm drinking. You know, so I've always said that obsessing on consistency when it comes to these blends is really kind of silly because for one, the consumer is going to perceive it differently based on all these external factors anyway. So if you're going to experience this cigar differently today than you are tomorrow, and I have an opportunity when I'm, you know, going to another production to tweak the blend and make it a little bit better because we got some newer tobacco that's, you know, working better with the blend, or because we discover something, you know, I'm always going to make that decision to try to improve the cigars and be okay with the slight change, than just default to trying, you know, muting things and putting the exact same cigar out there all the time. Because it's living and breathing and changing just like we are. So why not embrace that rather than fight it? You're muted, Reinhard.
How did you actually end up with the Kellner Boutique factory then? Did you approach them, or did you meet the Kellner family before through your antique paper business?
We met through a mutual friend, and, you know, I was making cigars really just for friends and family at that point. And Hendrik said, you know, come on to the Dominican. We can do that here. You can make some spectacular stuff. Just, you're not going to be able to do it at, you know, big productionizable levels. But if you want to do what you're doing and expand it and make a great line, it's completely possible. And so I went there and we started blending. And of course he was right. But in a way, I found myself right back where I started. You know, it's not like you blend a cigar and then this is your recipe and then you don't never have to do that work again. The stuff is changing all the time. You know, he's getting new tobacco. I can't tell you how many times I get a phone call and they say, oh, we got one more bale of this left. And, you know, that's not happening anymore, or this is not being grown, or, you know, even in these blends, when you have 5 or 7 tobaccos in an aviator, you sometimes, if one of these filler tobaccos has maybe a better growing season than it did the year before, that alone could throw off the entire cigar. Maybe that tobacco is now going to overpower 2 others and the complexity is lost, or it's going to add a dimension that's going to take away the acidity and suddenly there's no depth, or it's going to change the mechanics of the cigar. You know, we're not just blending for flavor. Some of the best tasting cigars I ever blended are just not productionizable because they're not going to combust at the right level, or they're not going to give you the right smoke volume with relative ease, or for a variety of reasons, they're just not something you could push out to the public. So, you know, with all these things in mind, you're just working to keep this moving, changing product as good as it can be. And I learned that early on working with Kellner, and that's why we started with the Aviator series. And we have a similar philosophy for other lines like Accomplice, but Aviator is really as true as it can be to that philosophy of, hey, listen, we're not afraid to change. We're always going to use great, vibrant stuff, and it's not going to last forever. I mean, I'm using a 13-year-old binder on this cigar. It's not an unlimited thing. At some point, we're going to have to try to use something else.
So when you get that call that something's running out and you got to change something, do you fly it down to the Dominican then? Or do you also rely on them with slight adjustments?
Well, I won't put anything out without tasting it, because you can't trust any factory. Like in the eyes of any factory, I don't care who it is, they think that people see the band, that's it. And you know what? They're probably right for 95% of the people, but I'm sitting with guys like you, and I'm not doing this to sell cigars to 95% of the people. I'm sitting here to have conversations with close friends, and you know, I want to have something that I can really enjoy and be proud of. And if you're going to blend for that 5%, you have to react to changes. It doesn't always require a trip. Like when we ran out of there's an old San Vicente that we used to use as the binder in a few different aviators that now I forget how much we have left, but we're only using it for the cochon volant because I want to extend the amount of time that it's going to run out. And we found a better, a replacement that made the Envoy much better. So you do things like that, you juggle stuff around, and hopefully there's always something new and fantastic on the horizon that we could use.
So before you just mentioned acidity, and I think acidity is a highly important component in a beautiful smoke. What are some of these other nuances that you are looking for in particular when you're blending a cigar? I mean, you mentioned construction, obviously, and the combustibility being an important factor. So not just the aroma and taste profile, but also construction. But especially when it comes to, and the Kellner family over at Davidoff, they speak of the stimulation of the palate, right? What are you looking for when it comes to those components?
Well, I'm a stickler for volume and mechanics, right? I mean, construction shouldn't even enter into it. I'm almost insulted when a person says, "Oh, I had your cigar, super construction." Thanks. There's 50-cent bundle cigars with perfect construction all over the place, right? It should be properly constructed. Like, let's not even talk about that. So once we're past that, volume and mechanics are extremely important. I want to take a small puff of this cigar and have that beautiful, silky mouthful of smoke. And if you don't have that, you can't really deliver the experience onto the palate. I'm on the Cigar Journal tasting panel, and oftentimes there's some cigars that, I mean, there's something in there to enjoy, but you have to do that work. Take those 3-4 puffs before you're getting that smooth layer of smoke. That's why I'm not a fan of, fancy cutters or all these crazy ways to cut cigars that sort of make the smoke turbulent as you pull it out of your mouth, because somebody did this to a cochon volant in a shop. They said, "Oh, you got to try this, smoke it with this crazy cutter." And, I'll try anything. And I took one puff and it like sort of mixed the smoke up, and it was like light over my palate. And for me, it didn't work at all. And I'm wondering, is this person even experiencing these cigars as they were intended to be experienced? You're supposed to experience the even burning of all these tobaccos at the same time, smoothly going over your tongue. And if you're chopping things up, or you're maybe not puffing enough, or the cigar is not combusting at the level it's supposed to combust, you're not going to be getting that combination. And maybe what you're tasting is pleasant, but it's not going to be the intended blend. It's not going to be that nice, even, solid mouthful of this set of tobaccos burning in the ratios that they're supposed to burn, if that makes sense. I think you asked me more about what I'm looking for.
Components aromatically and in terms of taste profile.
So I come from, many years I smoked just Cuban cigars. And with Cuban cigars, it's really more about the strengths of the filler tobaccos. The filler is far more important to the blends. Blending in the Dominican Republic, it becomes a lot more about the other components. But the advantage of Dominican tobacco is that it's very aromatic. It's beautifully aromatic. Sometimes it doesn't have the strengths that you want. Nicaragua is on the same tectonic plate as Cuba. So some of the tobacco can have similar strengths, but then you're losing, if Nicaraguan puros, in my opinion, can tend to be a little bit linear. So when you're combining all of these tobaccos, and, most of our cigars tend to be 3-4 country blends, you can aim towards cigars that, not speaking too specifically about the flavor, are going to give you a full mouthfeel, a complex flavor, but they're going to give you the aromas that you enjoy, the strengths that are necessary, and the flavors, right? I mean, flavor is most important, but we are also blending for these other things.
Because you mentioned the cutting aspect, Pete was asking on Facebook, why doesn't certain cigar companies educate us on how to cut which type of cigar? Would you have specific preferences in cutting cigars? Like, do you have a specific
I've never found a cigar that I didn't want to just do a straight cut on, right? I don't understand other cuts. I mean, I've tried everything, but even a simple V cut, I'm just not going to be, I'm potentially not drawing evenly. I mean, you don't know what's going on in here, right? Even if a cigar is perfectly constructed, the tobacco may be twisting as it moves down the body of the cigar. You don't know if when I'm drawing on this part of the cigar, where is that over here? Why am I going to make a V cut and potentially not be sucking air in from this part? Maybe I'm going to combust in one portion. Maybe it's on the inside, maybe it's on the outside. It just doesn't make any kind of sense to me, you know. And I suppose that, again, if you're only blending for 5% of your customers, is it in a big cigar company's best interest to scold 95% of the people about what cutter they're using? And at the end of the day, listen, whatever brings you joy is what you should be doing. I mean, if you love that V cut, or you love this crazy, I mean, there's a bunch of other cuts people have tried. Like, it's all about putting a smile on your face. You know, we're here to enjoy ourselves. So, like, God bless if you like it. And, you know, maybe you can make it work. And maybe there's cigars where it makes some kind of sense. It just doesn't to me. But I don't see the benefit in telling people they're right or wrong.
Darren, for a guy from Nashville, you have a very sort of Italian name, Cioffi. Do you have European roots? Because I know you've got a particular sort of relationship with Europe, right? Any family roots?
Yeah, well, I mean, until this happened, I'm in Europe quite a lot, somewhere between a quarter and a half of the time. But my family is all from Pozzuoli. It's too bad Gino's not here. My great grandmother is actually from near Avellino, near where he lives. But yeah, they're all from southern Italy. And my mother, actually, though, her most of her family is from former Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. But yeah, we're mostly Italian. But I'm a Northern American Italian. That's how I was raised, and you know, I guess that's.
Would you say that the affair with Europe also sort of fostered your love for antiques?
Well, it was the other way around. I went there looking for stuff, and I don't know. I just discovered that my sensibilities were more in line with hanging out there, which is why I'm going crazy right now. 3 months at home.
You are in Nashville right now, aren't you?
Yeah, Nashville, Tennessee.
How is the whole situation for you, by the way? How's things moving along?
It's all right. I mean, I'm socially restless. That's the phrase I've come up with to describe this. I'm thankful. You know, we don't have a lot of, you know, Tennessee was not that hard hit. In my county, I'm just outside Nashville in Williamson County. It's really not bad at all here. They've already opened restaurants to some degree. And, you know, I'm staying quiet and staying at home. Luckily, I have a comfortable home environment. But, you know, I miss my friends. I miss airplanes and restaurants. And I'm looking forward to be able to partake in those things once again sometime soon.
We had some very interesting conversations and discussions going on about vintage cigars in the chat box. Darren, could you probably enlighten us a little bit regarding your love for vintage cigars and what that really means in terms of smoking experience? Sure.
It's well, again, vintage to me is a bit different than vintage to most people, right? Like for me, vintage cigars is 1870s through 1930s. Sort of after that point, things get a little bit wonky in mid-century. You know, some of the Cubans are a different story, of course, but it's not really what I'm interested in. You know, the Cuban cigars, even the ones that are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, the branding is all similar. You know what you're getting into, whether it's great or not. It's not exciting or interesting to me. But the really early stuff is, you know, Cuban or not, because the branding is different, the packaging is different. You know, for me, it's about the whole product. It's about the appearance and the labels and the artwork and what someone went through to put this whole thing together. You know, Cuban tobacco ages. You can design a non-Cuban cigar that's meant to age for 20 or 30 years, but you have to really do it with great intent. Your average non-Cuban cigar is not meant to be laid down for that period of time. You know, the average one after about 5 years is going to lose a lot of its flavor. Whereas, you know, a Cuban might have more longevity, whether it was intended to be aged or not. And the really early stuff, you know, when you smoke a 100-year-old cigar, 120-year-old cigar, it's interesting more than anything. You know, you get crazy flavors and things you might not expect, but they're not powerful. You know, they're super, super subtle. You don't want to pair a 100-year-old cigar with anything. You just want to sit there and taste it. But I'm confident that this is not what these things tasted like 100 years ago. And I'm confident that it's not a mind-blowing experience. You're not having it saying, "Oh, holy cow, this is amazing." It's just an interesting thing to do. And the cost-benefit analysis of smoking 100-year-old cigars doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather have the beautiful packaging intact with the cigars in it that send me to another place and time, you know, than sit there smoking $200 cigars when I could smoke a $15 cigar that's going to be 1,000 times tastier and more enjoyable. But I love buying and selling and owning that stuff. I mean, it's really beautiful.
Have like a huge storage space for all that antique stuff, right?
You get a lot of it, yeah.
We had a question from Ian. Ian, it's great to see you on the call. How are you?
Well, actually, my question, you've sort of answered that. I mean, I've tasted some Cubans, and I'm from England, as you can probably tell, and a lot of people buy cigars at auction there and pay a lot of money for old cigars. I'm not sure my palate's enough developed to appreciate a $100 or $200 cigar. So, is it just the subtlety and these sort of delicate flavors you've been talking about, or is there something really special about finding a really old cigar?
I mean, there can be. That's the thing about old Cubans is it's all over the map. I mean, sometimes you light one up that it's, really lost everything at this point, and then sometimes you really can get quite amazing flavors. But you always have to look at that cost benefit ratio. If you're talking about 30, 40-year-old cigars that are Cuban, there's still probably enough strength there where it's worth smoking, let's say. But is it worth the crazy money? I don't know. Maybe a 10-year-old cigar that you aged yourself or put some energy into or bought at a more fair price would provide almost as much enjoyment, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like wine. I mean, I have bought wine over the years. I've got bottles in my cellar now that I could not afford to buy now.
Right.
And I enjoy them. But, I wouldn't pay, 100, 200 pounds for a bottle, but I got it for 15 pounds, some years ago. So it's, it may be like that. I have a cigar club I belong to, and we had a 20-year-old Cuban last year, which we really enjoyed, but it was sort of probably one of the most subtle smokes I've had. And again, probably best not to pair it with anything or only something fairly light so that you're not going to be overpowering it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a few boxes left of those Cohiba pyramids from 2001 or so when they did the limited edition. They messed up the pricing then, so it was a really good deal. I bought a lot of them, and I was surprised even with that how much it had lost, and we're talking not even 20 years. It was still enjoyable, but not for what that cigar is probably worth as a vintage cigar today.
Thank you.
Kolya was just showing some weird stuff. Kolya, tell us something about that.
Well, this is actually the oldest cigars that I have in my humidor. They're dated 1889 till 1898. So within that, 10-year period. I actually smoked one of them in London. They were gifted to me by a friend. I have one left. Quite interesting. Figurado size. But yeah, as Darren mentioned, it's just beautiful having those really old paper insides, and it's crazy. I didn't even know until I had a longer conversation with Darren that they even had printing mechanisms that were that delicate during that time. So it's actually a very interesting topic.
You can date that box to post 1893.
To post 1893. Okay.
The label's embossed, and the embossing technology, they were making stone lithographs, of course, before, but that process was not invented till 1893.
Okay. Well, it says something about the Medaglia d'Oro exposition. So this cigar apparently won some gold medal at an 1885 exposition.
There are boxes like that have all sorts of gold medals on it. They used to just make them all up.
Oh, okay.
It was part of the course. Gold medals. If you guys want to see some really old stuff, I can go grab from the humidor. If you give me 30 seconds.
Please do.
Hold on.
Sure.
Kolya, in the meantime, it's fantastic to see you got a haircut.
Oh yeah.
Did the barbershops open in Germany, or?
Yeah, they just opened back up yesterday.
And you got the first appointment. Bloody hell.
Well, I got one today. I'm using my barber that I had since 2006. It's the funny thing is, the shop is the same, but every time there's another Turkish guy, one you have never seen before. So you always get a different haircut. I think it's just a front to smuggle people into the country or something. But they always ask me for €9, and I always give them 15, and I'm happy with that. So that works.
Ray also got a nice haircut, or better to say, a nice shave. Or is it just because you're not wearing a hat today, brother?
It's usually like that, but yeah, it's I do it a nice shave yesterday, so yeah, maybe we're back to life again.
So in the 1850s, 1860s, prior to the Civil War in the US, boxes were typically packaged in bundles. And the reason that they switched to boxes was so that they could apply tax stamps. And there was a sort of transitional period in the early 1870s where nobody really knew what they were doing. And this is a box that's kind of from that period. The other way that it can be dated is the type of chromolithograph, you'll notice, is very different than what Kolya showed you. This is what is called a crayon chromolithograph. So this is a really early, this is a Cuban box. This is a box of Oscuros. So it was when they first started using bundles, and you can see the cigars are in 2 bundles of 50 inside of the complete box of 100. And in a similar format, this is just a funny piece that I found. It's a cigar box. The label's about 1910, box is about 1910 or so. Tranquilla is the name of the cigar. You open it up, you can see the label, the cigars. But this was a magician's item. So it was meant for a magician to show the people the cigars, close it, and then this label is upside down. So he would somehow distract you, turn it around like this, open it up again, and the cigars are gone. Anyway, pretty cool item.
That's hilarious.
Stuff like that's exciting and interesting and, unique.
Darren, how is the construction, or how is the craftsmanship on these old cigars? When you light up some of these, how is it in comparison to today's cigars?
It's different. I mean, most of them are figurados, not because that they were trying to be clever or special, but because, you were like those cigars that Kolya showed you, the person was striking a match on his boot in the wind, and then he had to light it. And the only way to do that was the tiny little point, and then the flame could grow. That's why these ones I showed you as well, they're tapered at the front and the back. It's hard to say how good or bad the construction was because they're so, old at this point that they're going to combust really well.
I once heard this very funny story of yours where you mentioned, like, you take some of these old cigars, and when the wrapper is probably damaged or something, you just put a new sort of neutral wrapper around it, and the old wrapper becomes like the second binder, right?
Yeah, I call it capa adicional. We take, if I have a vintage box where the wrappers got jostled around and they're not quite perfect, I'll bring them to the Dominican. We leave the wrappers right where they are. If it has bands, I'll take the bands off, and then we just put we use Banao as well, but it's like 15 years old. It's super light. We just put it right over the old wrapper and put the band back on, and have them in a smokable format. So yes, there's an addition of some tobacco, and it's going to change the cigar, but it's still taking a unsmokable 100-year-old cigar and turning it into something at least that you can enjoy.
Sterling over on Facebook asked, which type of tobacco would you consider the best for aging?
Well, it's not so much the type of tobacco. It's more to do with the priming, right? Like there's not just Velado, Seco, Ligero, right? Because there's not 3 primings or 4 primings if you add Viso. There could be 13 primings on a plant. And if you want to age tobacco for an extremely long period of time, you're obviously not going to take the big leaves and do that. You're going to do that with the smaller leaves. Like these words are relative terms. There's no such thing as Velado. There's tobacco that's being used as Velado. There's no such thing as Ligero. You don't look at a leaf and say that's a Ligero leaf. It's being used as Ligero in the process of blending the cigars, which is why, words like that are being thrown around as marketing nonsense, and consumers are being sort of fed a line, but these are relative terms meant to describe how you're using different types of tobacco. And if I want to sit tobacco down for a long period of time, then I'm probably going to use an extremely late priming on a plant, like a really small late leaf, and then take that and age it down to the point where I can use it as a Ligero or something less.
How do you go about sort of sorting these type of tobaccos then with KBF? Do you have a different process or different wordings? Or
Yeah,
would
for me,
you use
I'm
those?
not running around. I mean, I'm doing more pestering Hendrik and other people than I am running around tasting things. I know my limitations, and yes, I have a palate, but I'm not a guy that can stick his head in a bale of raw tobacco and tell you that they did something tricky in the fermentation. Hendrik is that guy. So it's more about keeping the dialogue open and making sure he knows what I'm after. Like yesterday, we make night flight versions of aviators, for example, which are Maduro versions of the existing aviators, but we're just using the Corojo wrapper that we use on that. We're just taking the really dark leaves and using those for the night flight. This is not a leaf that anyone is using for Maduros. So the yield is extremely low, and I haven't had any in months, and I'm finally getting the shipment out, and he tells me there's only 50 sticks of night flight coming in. So, we're having a conversation now about, what Ecuadorian Corojo is out there that's similar to this, that there's maybe going to be a slightly bigger yield of darker leaves. So it's conversations like that, but I'm not going door to door, hunting this stuff. I'm just all ears open.
Another type of tobacco that you're using quite frequently or that you're fond of is Peruvian tobacco, right?
Done. We're
No
still
more-
using some, but there's no more Pelo de Oro. They're not growing it anymore.
Would you have anything that comes close or would give you like a similar profile?
We used in one cigar we used a Massachusetts tobacco, actually. It's sort of like a broadleaf. They were calling it a Connecticut broadleaf, but we discovered it was actually from southern Massachusetts, and we found that worked well in place of the Pelo de Oro.
Another question that we had over on Facebook from Arndt.
But typically, just to add one thing, it's not typically like this tobacco's gone, so we have to find one to put in. It's this tobacco's gone, so we have to change around the entire thing to keep the cigar in the wheelhouse we want it to be in, right? Like there's no like you swap things out. It's way too delicate a balance for that. We're rarely that lucky.
I can fully relate to that. Well, as you know, I'm producing my own red vermouth, and I always say it's like an herbal equation.
Right.
Once you change one little aspect, the entire thing changes, and you gotta start from the very beginning, because it's not enough to just take out a vanilla pod and then it's gonna taste less of vanilla. To just use any example, it's the overall thing that you need to change. Arndt had this question regarding the accomplished white Toro in tin boxes, because he's smoking one right now, and he said it's mind blowing. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Something crazy happened with that production. I mean, to be honest, I'm typically not even reaching for white band accomplices. I blended them to be a little bit more of an everyday smoke. They're a little bit, they're complex and elegant, and they've gotten great ratings, but it's just not for me personally. But this last batch of Toros, I'm smoking almost every day. I think it's the wrapper. I mean, they're just super dark and nice, and they're adding a lot to the flavor. They almost have like, this is the cigar we're talking about. These are the tins for Accomplice, for the Toro. It's the white band. There's like a central dark wood note. It's still surrounded by all of the other elements that you would expect from the Accomplice, and these come out of KBF as well. But I don't know, man. It's really just a magical thing that I hope we can duplicate for the next production.
Charlie, it's always a pleasure to see you on the call. You're actually in Massachusetts, and you had a question.
Yes, Darren, I just sent you a note. I've gone down to the Connecticut broadleaf farms, and I know they reached up into the Connecticut Valley into Massachusetts. Just wondering if you had been out to the farms or know which farms in southern Massachusetts your broadleaf might be coming from.
I don't, but I can certainly reach out and try to find out.
I'm just curious. Give me something to do while we're here in lockdown.
It's
Well,
if you
but-
want to try it, it's in the new Envoys, the Aviator Envoys, the last production or so.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's one of the filler tobaccos at Massachusetts.
You better not let the Commonwealth know about it. They might ban it.
Par for the course.
Exactly.
We have Rod on the call. Always a pleasure. He wanted to share a little story with Principle Cigars.
The pleasure is always mine. Darren, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Great to be talking to you here from Dubai. Just wanted to share a very funny story I had with Principal Cigars. So we were at the Dominican Republic visiting some of our brands there. And I was super jet lagged. I go down to the hotel and I go downstairs hoping that they're serving breakfast at 6 a.m. And obviously they were not. And the lady in the corner shop that basically helps, the toothpaste and what have you, all of those little things. I realized that they had cigars and I wasn't carrying any cigars with me. And I walk in and I see this phenomenal looking cigar in a box. And I'm looking, and they were aviators, were I think the Volante or the Volant aviators. And I look at them and I'm like, my God, those cigars look really good. So I told her there was a language barrier and I told her I want to, I was basically insinuating to the effect that no, it's a full box, it's a full box. So I just pulled out some, a big, note from my pocket, gave it to her, took one cigar and walked out. She was fine with it. Cut the cigar, lit it and smoked it. And I'm like, my God, this is an amazing cigar. Okay. Fast forward, I keep on thinking that I need to research the cigar. I never looked at what the cigar was, but I do remember her giving me a flyer of some sort about the cigars, and I just couldn't find the flyer in any of my documents or books or what have you that I keep after such trips. So obviously during the quarantine, my wife looks at me and she's like, don't you think it's time for you to organize all of those cigar papers and what have you that you have in that corner? So I start doing that, and lo and behold, that flyer comes out. And I'm like, okay, good, great. So now I have to work on these cigars to get them into Dubai. That was literally 3 days ago. And then I'm logging in and I get from Reinhard that talks about your cigars. So it's just, I really believe in transfer of energy and calling people, remotely and all of that stuff. And I just wanted to share this story.
That's great. That's like when you learn a new word and then you hear that word 3 times the week you learned it.
Right? Exactly. But an absolute pleasure. I mean, I only had one chance to try your cigars, love them, and I'm sure we'll have the chance to speak and very soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rod, for bringing up that story. It's wonderful, and I'm glad that we get to connect people from all over the world and then bring together cigar lovers from different ends of, all these continents and people enjoying these wonderful products. It means a lot to us. So it's always great to see you all on the call. Speaking of, Darren, where your products are and where you're distributed at, Marvin over on Facebook was asking whether your cigars are available in Austria.
Not yet. Germany.
Yeah. And Austria is not that easy when it comes to buying cigars, because you can't go online and have some shipped to you. So challenge, but we're very much looking forward to having your cigars over in Austria pretty soon. I wanted to also, because you showed that beautiful white band of the accomplice. You had some funny cigars and some funny things that you brought to the market, where you really featured some of the old paper and some of the old stuff that you had in your inventory, right? Speaking of burning down cash, for example, and all these things. Could you show us some of that, maybe?
We did a project called Money to Burn, where one of the other things I deal in are old stocks and bonds and financial documents. And so we made this project in 2013 where we used the original railroad bonds in the construction of the box. So this is actually a bond that was printed and issued in 1921. And we use I don't want these to fall out, but the coupons from the bonds are the footbands on the cigars. So when you buy the box, you're getting the actual 100-year-old railroad bond. We made 800 of them at the time. There's only about less than 100 left, I think, in there. But this was the Money to Burn project. And we have some ideas for some follow-ups. that we want to get out sometime soon. Yeah, these were made in 2013. All the cigars were rolled then as well. So it's at the point now where you get a box that's quite old cigars and even older packaging.
Beautiful. Sarah, pleasure that you could join us. Sarah was actually watching over on Facebook, and now she joined us. She had a couple of comments. Please bring them up.
So that I've just commented that I absolutely love the Frothy Monkey. When you brought out the Frothy Monkey, it instantly put a smile on my face just because I love the name. And it's the perfect excuse for a good cup of coffee. And my daughter in lockdown has just bought us a Longi proper barista coffee machine. So I'm absolutely in heaven now with a proper latte and a Frothy Monkey. And also, I just wanted to say that, and I just love them. They're the perfect, quick.
The name might not make sense, but Frothy Monkey is a group of coffee shops down here in Tennessee. And so this originally was a cigar we made for them, for people to enjoy at the coffee shop. And the only reason why it sort of happened was because, the main owner, investor guy was fine with it, but he said, listen, you got to talk to the CEO. I really want this. It's his company. He's the one that has to decide. And I thought, well, there goes that deal, because when business people get involved, these things never work. And I meet the guy, and it turns out he's a hardcore smoker going to the cigar shop every day after work. And it's been a great project. And you're right. People have taken to those cigars everywhere.
They're absolutely brilliant. And they're very good for the UK in cold weather, because it's a decent smoke in a short space of time.
The idea was we wanted something that was going to be strong enough to with a flavor that was going to be able to cut through espresso-based beverages and coffee, but also because you have many people from the general public there smoking, we wanted something that was going to be smooth on the palate. And I think we accomplished that with a slightly higher bit of acidity backed with some dark chocolate flavors. It's the wrapper on that cigar that does all the heavy lifting. It's from a small farm called Katui, which is owned by Hendrik Kellner's sister, Monica Kellner. So we get the Katui from her, and the last few productions have just been better and better and better. And the cigar has been, way better than it has any business being as a house cigar of a coffee shop.
I knew there was a woman in there somewhere that was had an influence.
Lovely lady. Most beautiful farmer you'll ever meet as well.
And my second part of my comment was just that your incredible knowledge of ephemera and antique ephemera is just a joy on all the packaging and all the communications that you do. It's one of my personal passions, as you know, and I love that. It brings an additional dimension, an additional layer to the pleasure of buying cigars or smoking it and unwrapping something so special. So thank you for that. It is a really amazing contribution to the cigar world, that, I think.
Thank you.
Ian had a follow-up question regarding the acidity that you just mentioned, Darren.
You're muted.
It's probably my ignorance, but I know about acidity in wine. How do you get acidity in cigars? And and are you looking? Is that one of the elements you're looking at when you're blending a cigar? Or
yeah, I mean, to some degree you want it, but it's not a wheel when it becomes prominent. That's not a wheelhouse that a lot of people play in terms of other blenders, because it's quite difficult. But really, it's if you're tasting a cigar and you get that sort of citrusy flavor, that tanginess. I mean, obviously you don't want it to be overwhelming, but it's an important dimension to give you that full mouthfeel, right? If you have a sweet cigar or a leathery cigar and it's backed up with some of that faint acidity, it's what can help give you that complete mouthfeel and complex experience. But it's not difficult to imagine or hard to discern. Once you taste it, it's there. It's just about using it in balance and as a tool to bring you where you want to be with the tobacco. But
which tobacco do you choose to get the acidity, or do they all have acidity? It's just a question of balancing. Yeah, it can be in so many different things, and it also can come about with two tobaccos working together. I mean, these things are not
it's not like making a sauce where it's just the sum total of what you're putting into the pot. It's about, two things. A plus B does not equal C. A plus B equals something crazy. And you just never know what you're going to get when you start blending. So there's nothing that I would say that's like our go-to thing to put acidity in a cigar, but it is an important factor that's going to be derived from some combination that's in there.
Thank you.
I realized that another critical aspect in your approach in your blending is that you're not really looking for strength in the cigars, but much rather for complexity and depth in aroma and flavor.
It's flavor. I mean, strength is, I don't mind strength, but the thing is that you want strength to come from the flavor. Look, it's very easy to make a spicy cigar. If I want a really spicy cigar that's quote unquote strong, or like, for the American palate, that is not hard to do. I can make you a spicy cigar, but delivering strength that's truly from flavor, that's more difficult. And, I think that consumers, particularly in this country, are led to believe that, a spicy cigar equals a strong cigar. And that's not the case. Do you want to smoke a really spicy cigar that's not going to give you anything else? When I see new smokers come in, typically people will start out with very light cigars. And if they like it, then they say, I love cigars, give me something strong. And they go right up to really quote unquote strong cigars that are just spicy. But if they stay with it and they're really a connoisseur, their tastes tend to settle down right in the middle. And that's where we live. It's that mid-range where you can experience the most. If the cigar is too light or too strong, it's not, in my opinion, going to be, it has less of a likelihood of being a complete experience. But in the mid-range, you can give someone a lot of flavor where they can also enjoy the fabric of the smoke, and the lighter flavors are going to be more visible to them as well and be a part of the experience, not just a bunch of black pepper on the tongue.
Did you see that very same evolution with your palate and how you just changed in your consumer behavior and the things that you appreciate and like?
To be honest, my early days in smoking cigars are just not in my mind. I don't even remember. I couldn't even tell you what my first cigar was. I had no magical experience. I've always been a cigar smoker as far as I can remember. And I don't know. I don't feel, I mean, my tastes have changed over the years as, you get better, you experience new things. I like to feel like you become a better blender with time, but your palate's always improving. But I just don't remember the early days or the path that I took. It's not something that I recall.
Did you have an affinity with strong cigars at some point?
No, I mean, I just don't want anything harsh. I love a strong cigar, listen, there's times I'm in the mood for a Toscano. Like I just want something simple with a simple flavor and I don't care. And I want something in my hand and I'm complete. That $1 cigar at that moment is going to provide me with more joy than one of mine. And there are days where I wake up and everything tastes bad. So it doesn't matter what I smoke. And there's other days where everything tastes good. So it also doesn't matter what I smoke. But it's those days when you're tasting reality, that's when you want to do the blending. And that's when you want to smoke your good stuff.
And also, I still remember the last time that we met, you mentioned that you get bored really easily, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I completely get bored on my stuff. If you give me a cigar that I haven't had, I'll always have more joy smoking that than something I'm familiar with that I know is really great.
How do you sort of factor that into your own company? Like, how do you make that also a viable business case then?
Well, I can separate the intellectual decision of what's better from the enjoyment that I'm receiving. Like I can smoke 2 cigars and say, I know this one's better and this is why, but I feel like smoking that one because it's new to me, or, maybe it'll go somewhere. I can learn something from it.
So would you say that you still have like that curiosity to come up with new stuff, adding new lines to Principle Cigars as well?
Yeah. And not even just from the blending perspective, but from the branding, the artwork. I mean, we've been struggling with the FDA situation in the United States, and part of the big sad thing about some of the potential legislation we could be hit with is it's taking out an extremely important part of it for me. The branding and the artwork. I put a lot of attention into this, and if you take that out, or if plain packaging becomes a thing, an enormous portion of the joy is gone. Because listen, like I said before, a lot of people can't tell what they're smoking, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying a product's branding. when you go to the wine shop and you see wines that you don't know, do you not enjoy looking at the amazing labels that some people have come up with? I do. And there are some brands that maybe I don't love the cigar, but I appreciate the branding. It's nice. And I derive some joy from lighting and enjoying this thing and just, looking at the branding. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you want to have a sense of it and you don't want to separate yourself from reality, but I think branding is a part of the experience. I mean, you're looking at it. It needs to be aesthetically pleasing.
And when we think back to those, like the later part of the 19th century, when cigar smoking was really tremendously more popular than it is today, when you probably had 70 or 80% of the whole population smoking, most of them were illiterate, right? So the only way for them to sort of understand the product or get some more information out of it was through the visuals.
It was all part of that perfect storm. I mean, the visual aspect of cigars, like you said, you had a huge amount of people are smoking. There was no real way to communicate with these people except for that point of sale. And the point of sale is that inner lid label on the cigar box. Like, just like this, you go to the shop, you see this label. This is it. This is all you've got. And you're talking about a market that was extremely segmented. It was about 1883. All those taxes I talked about before started expiring. So suddenly cigars became a lot less expensive and a lot more affordable. So you have a huge percentage of people smoking. The price is going down. All the Indonesian tobacco, the Sumatra, was coming into the United States suddenly at that time. So they had a great source for wrap relief. And it was a perfect storm. And then, like you said, you have illiterate people coming into shops, particularly the working class and, a lot of people that were smoking. And that cigar counter is looking at you with all those open boxes. And that 6x9 label is your only shot to get a nickel out of a customer. And this was huge business. It's not just like there was one cigar shop in town. Every major corner in a big city would have been a cigar shop. Every town you went into, there were mom and pop operations making cigars for the local market. So they estimate that there were about 1 million different brands in the United States by 1910 or so. And this is not like some made up number. I mean, in some of the great collections, the labels exist. You can see that many different cigar box labels. And this is not like, simple stuff either. This is I have some labels here I could show you guys, but like every subject matter you can imagine found its way onto a cigar box at some point. They had sporting themes and local celebrities, famous people, ethnic themes, slice of life stuff, patriotic things. Spanish American War was happening. So you had actual depictions of events that were going on around the turn of the century, showing themselves on cigar labels, anything that might interest a person enough to give you the nickel. I always say I liken it to, the big business of today. If Samsung and Apple only could compete for your business with a simple small advertisement, that advertisement would be like the shark in Back to the Future that comes out at you. It would be ridiculous. And this was the big business of the day with one tool to get your money. It was a 6x9 piece of paper. And so not only was the subject matter incredible, but the quality of the lithography was something else. They were looking at anything they could do to make these labels jump off of the box at you. And it was an extremely laborious process, from the artwork itself to the actual printing. Lithographers were going to work in white suits and top hats. These guys were extremely well paid. And if you look closely at a cigar label, it's like a little painting. All of those colors were applied to the label separately with Bavarian limestones, and don't forget this was 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, you're talking about 10, 13 stones hitting a piece of paper with the registration of a pinpoint, and then the paper having to be embossed. It's an incredible thing.
It's absolutely fascinating. But the one idea that just struck me was when you think about 100 years back, all these people were really relying on the visuals when they chose their cigar. Do you see any parallels to today's Instagram society?
That's a good question. Well, the approach is different in that Instagram is so easy and obtainable, right? Like, it's not hard for me to make a nice little picture and put it up and get some instant satisfaction. whereas the cigar label was an extremely expensive and laborious thing. I mean, yes, they're both visual, but I think that's where the similarity ends. And if you look at the industry kind of gets it and doesn't get it at the same time. You know, people are very concerned with the look and feel of their product. But if you go into a cigar shop and you look for, you know, a box from across the room, this is what a box of Aviators looks like. This is a Night Flight box, but you know, you're not even up close of it. And this is iconic and simple. You can see that it's Art Deco. You can see that it's a strong shape with some particular imagery. In this case, this angel, you know, it jumps out at you. So much of the industry has nice artwork, but it ends up being a mishmash of coins and flowers. And, you know, to me, it's just a mess. It doesn't have, it's like a good song has dynamics, you know, sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's soft, it builds, it changes. And you need that empty space and that negative space or that quiet space. You can't have a dish of food that's, you know, has to have a creamy element, a soft element. You need, in anything that you are consuming, visual, food, whatever, you need dynamics in order to deliver a complete experience. And visually, I think there's not a lot of dynamics in the artwork of the tobacco industry. I think that the wine industry gets it a lot better. I mean, you go and you see all sorts of creative things on wine bottles. I think it, you know, okay, there's a lot more money in that than there is in tobacco, but, and maybe more minds and people are paying artists more, you know, that are better at their job and have been doing it for longer, but they seem to get it. Tobacco, it's very rare that I see something and I'm like, wow, that's great, visually speaking, but it does exist.
I think a good analogy would probably be like the cover pictures on podcasts, where you just have this very limited space and you need to really convey your message in a super small format, and it has to sort of strike you immediately, otherwise you wouldn't recognize it.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, it's just like a song. They say the average person decides if they like a song. I forget the number, but I live in Nashville where everyone's a songwriter. Some number of seconds, you know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. You like it or you don't. And, you know, okay, maybe some art takes some time to build, but you got to be able to get people, and a label's no different. So that's what its job is. There's one job, to get you.
So with all that in mind, how do you personally feel about the current state of the industry, and especially how things are communicated? Obviously, there's so many voices in the industry now because social media is giving everybody a voice, right?
I think it's great. I mean, just because I have my way of doing things and what I think is a good way, that doesn't mean that other people are wrong or that I'm even right. And just like from the antique industry, I mean, take something that I deal in that a lot of people deal in, like postcards. If you go to a postcard show, maybe you have 100 dealers. Everyone's doing things a little bit differently. Yes, they all have postcards for sale, but one person has the cards positioned where they have to give you the topics. Another person has them out there. Another person has them arranged by price category. Another one has them by subject matter. So there are different approaches to what's really the same thing. And that's what makes the world go around. And that's what makes it interesting. And at the end of the day, a cigar is not a thing where you can just take a puff and decide that you like it or not. It's really about the whole experience. You really need to sit with it, smoke it, enjoy it, see that feeling that it gives you. Like I can't give you in one quick mouthful something that's going to necessarily convert you. But I hope I can do that if you sit down and take the time to really understand what you're tasting and see how this thing is layered, see how the layers build, see that mouthfeel that it gives you, see that the experience is different from the experience you had when you smoke something a little bit more mundane.
I love the fact that you mentioned the word experience, because that's a huge part of my daily business, obviously. I know that you're not a big fan of the whole pairing thing and you know, combining your cigars with too many different beverages and all that. Where do you see that holistic experiential factor coming into the appreciation of a cigar?
Well, it's just that. It's about the experience. I'm not saying that pairings don't work when it comes to the experience you're trying to create. I'm just saying that pairings are highly overrated if you're looking at it on a micro level of just, this is the taste of this cigar, this is the taste of this coffee right now, and is it a magic in my mouth? That doesn't really exist, because the coffee in this cup is sort of room temperature because it's been sitting here, and the tobacco is not that strong. I mean, if I take a sip of this coffee, that cool liquid in my mouth, if I immediately puff the cigar, I'm just not going to get everything out of this cigar. I would need to take a drink of this coffee and then wait a few moments, let my palate adjust, then I can get the cigar. Now, these two things separately might combine to like send me in a certain direction in terms of, my experience of what I want to enjoy in this moment while I'm talking with you guys, but it's not some magical explosion of flavors. And I'm in the South here. We're everybody's drinking bourbon, and this, bourbon, whiskey, it all is just extremely powerful on your palate. I challenge anyone to find a, a dark liquor like that you can take and then immediately have a puff of the cigar and be tasting all of the cigar. You just can't. Coffee is a great companion, especially when it's warm, but there's nothing. I like dessert wines, sauternes, Tokais, like syrupy sweet white wines. I think are even a bit closer to having a smaller period that it takes for your palate to adjust, even than a port might. But I don't know. For me, if I have a beverage and a cigar, I'm taking more puffs than I am taking drinks. So I don't want anything to overpower or outshine the cigar. And so pairing becomes a lot more about what do I want to enjoy also on its own at this moment than what's going to go so magically. It's not like food, food and wine. You can have that magical mouth experience where, wow, this is so great drinking this after I eat this. Cigars are a bit different. They're more delicate. They need to be enjoyed on a clean palate.
Still, would you say that all the surrounding aspects, be it the lighting or the sounds and even the tactile, would come into play when you consider holistic experience?
Yeah, I mean, even the people you're with, who you're enjoying spending your time with. These are all things that are going to impact how you like the cigar.
You're big into Art Deco as well, right? There's different styles or different forms of Art Deco, I'd say. Do you see a difference in how it is perceived in the US in comparison to over here in Europe?
Well, I deal mostly in Art Nouveau things. I work mostly with Art Deco because I think it's a little bit easier for the consumer to understand. And also, to be frank, Art Nouveau is extremely tough. Hiring artists that can work with it and do what you want in that style is just super difficult. Art Deco is, like you said, there are many different styles. And I don't know about the appreciation today in terms of European versus American mindset, but in terms of when it was all created, you definitely have more American forms of Art Deco, more European forms of Art Deco, and even within them, so many different branches. And it's fun, and and when you're creating and when you're working in that style, there's nothing wrong today with even combining them or just, it's fun and it's not impossible to work with. Like, I mean, you take the Accomplice box, for example. This is not even our main line of cigars, but yes, this is Art Deco. But you know what? Like, if you look at the woman closely, these long, sinuous lines are really sort of indicative of Art Nouveau. I mean, the font we used here, yes, it has more, I'd say, craftsman style elements that are clearly a form of Deco, but it's still got these long curves that are reflective of Art Nouveau. This is, it's Art Deco on paper, but there's so many things about this that play with other styles. And if you really know, 100 years ago, you would have never have seen this mismatch. But I believe that it works. Whereas, aviators are much more clear, industrial, modern, a lot more classic Art Deco, later Art Deco, 1930s, 40s, not quite 1920s.
With art, with design, with cigars, there's always trends that come and go. It's always a back and forth. Do you sort of go with those trends, or would you much rather ignore them and just have your own path forward?
I completely ignore it and I just do what I want to do, because you're talking about design, and I feel like if I like it, then other people will like it. It's in the antique business. I know what works from a collector's perspective, right? I know what someone's going to want to own and put on their wall or in their collection. And I try to translate that into the marketing world. Like, if a collector likes this style, if I like it, the consumer is probably going to like it as well. Like I wanted to do something a little bit out. I have a new line coming out called Angelique. And one thing that I was a fan of is in the 1960s, so it's a bit outside of my wheelhouse, department stores had these fantastic script logos. You still see, like, Lord and Taylor has that script logo. There's a few others today that still exist. if you Google it, you can find a lot of great examples of 1960s department store logos. So I wanted something that would look like it was from the 60s, but that would be really a callback to that style, because nobody's playing with it. And even the few department stores that still use it, they're switching to block logos that are not, in my opinion, attractive anymore. So this is Angelique, and I don't know if it's showing it to you backwards or not, but just this logo alone, it's a hand-drawn script logo that I went through thousands of iterations, and I held a contest to find the right one. And finally, a woman in Egypt came up with just this. And the rest of the branding, we wanted to be, in line with that. The 1960s, but a clean, sophisticated, elegant department store era look for the product. So it's not quite flower child 60s, but it's not taking itself that seriously either. And that's where some of this design is born. And I think it still fits in with our line. It's very specific. It's not such a departure philosophically from Art Deco in terms of the overall style, but it is something, specific and fun. And this is why, I've been wanting to play around with this for years. I had the idea for the line, and I thought it would be a natural marriage. And this is why it's such a shame if this gets taken away from us.
Just a comment there on the name. Are you aware of Angélique Marquise des Anges, of the film? Just look that up later. It's a French film from probably the 60s or 70s. So, yeah.
And so, Darren, you mentioned before that when it comes to some of the art and the antique stuff that you have, you're also focused on the marketing side, or how you could possibly sell certain things better because of varying trends and different styles that people are appreciating at that very moment. Does it feel totally different with cigars that you're putting out on the market?
The way I see it is, you have to focus on everything, right? I mean, this is an extremely difficult industry. You need it all. You have to have a exceptional product, because at the end of the day, people are going to smoke it. But you also need to have these visual elements. It's hard enough. If you don't have one element of the recipe, the chips are stacked against you, especially as a tiny company. You need the look and feel, you need the actual product, you need it all. You need the finances. I don't think that a half-ass approach works in 2020.
When you started in your early days of the antique business, there was this 17, 18-year-old Darren showing up at some dude's house or doing some garage selling. Did those people actually take you like for real, or did you ever have experiences where you thought like, what the hell is he doing here?
No, because in that industry, we're so starved for young people. Like when I started, and like I said, I was 17 or so, I was the youngest guy, and now I'm 44 and I'm still the youngest guy. It's people are aging out. People that really get antique paper or a lot of these different fields, they're aging out. We need young people. So in that field in particular, when someone young shows an appreciation at anything, you absolutely want to nurture their interest and help them. So I mean, I found people to be very helpful at that stage.
That's actually a very good point. And do you feel about the cigar industry the same way, that there would be like room for some young guys and new approaches, some fresh blood?
Yeah, it's like anything. I mean, your average cigar smoker, I don't think is too hung up on who made their cigars. I mean, they might appreciate a personality and be drawn to something. And of course, you're selling a lifestyle, right? So you need to be putting the right image forth. But the younger smokers, they don't want to be told what's good. They want to figure it out for themselves. I'm in Nashville. A hipster smoker from the East Side doesn't want to smoke a Cuban because his grandfather told him it was good. He wants to read about what's going on and sophisticated and informed decision about what's worth smoking and what's not.
Reinhard had another question, and a great one.
Sorry. Yes. Obviously, there's a lot of creativity with the tobacco. There's a lot of creativity with the cigars. There's a lot of experimenting with the tobacco and the art, and you're obviously inspired a lot by vintage boxes and the search that you're lucky to have with other cigar boxes that are that old. I've always been curious as to And quite frankly, I'm always tempted to ask the same question. The tobacco industry in general and all the cigars in general, they focus on tobacco predominantly from Central America and the areas around it. To date, places like the Middle East, for example, have not been touched upon in terms of the potential of that tobacco to be included in the blends of the cigars. Is this something that you've thought about, or is this something that could potentially intrigue you?
Well, I'm not an agronomist, and I have enough pursuits, and so I have to know where energy invested in knowledge is not really going to benefit me, right? Like knowing more about what can be done in different climates and different areas is not really going to benefit my ability to obtain that tobacco or to do anything. Like, I'm not at the point where I'm ready to go out there and do farming. So it's not a pursuit that I've invested a lot of research in, and I don't have a lot of good information. I'd be happy to try anything from anywhere, of course. But you're right. It's when we're using a tobacco from Paraguay. We have this project coming out called Commonwealth, and Commonwealth. The idea behind it, and this was actually only made possible by COVID because of the factory shutdown. This is a cigar that we're making that is literally a 10-country blend. So this is a limited run. We make, I think 3,000 sticks was the final production, but there's 1 wrapper, 2 binders, and filler tobacco from 7 different countries in here. So 10 altogether. So when you smoke this for the first time ever, you can smoke at the same time tobacco from 10 different countries. And we had been playing with this for years, but it was always difficult not to have 1 or 2 tobaccos overshadow a lot of what was going on. But we finally got to the point last year where we had a set of tobacco that was working, in the sense that you really did get a great amount of complexity from the cigar. We're using nothing as Ligero. So everything is sort of allowing everything else to shine, and everything works well together. So what we did when the factory shut down, let me try and show you my screen here. Can you guys see this?
Not just yet. Oh, there you go.
So this is the factory closed for the shutdown. This is Hendrik. This is Nacho, the factory manager. So typically he's just overlooking everyone rolling. He was a teacher at Davidoff for many years. He taught the rollers there. Now he manages KBF. So this is all the tobacco that we've laid out. You can see Cameroon, Brazil, Mexico, USA, Dominican, Peru. Somewhere in here is that Paraguay tobacco. But this caused us to try everything crazy that we could find. And this is the process of making the Commonwealth. So there is obscure stuff out there that can be used, but I'm not the guy that can give you great information on what will and won't work based on terroir or whatever else you're looking at from a agricultural perspective. But it's exciting when I hear it.
Thank you.
Even here in Europe, we had an exciting long-lasting tobacco culture. Like southern parts of Austria, for example, were growing tobacco for a long time.
Germany, Belgium, Holland, a lot of tobacco.
Did you ever look into that out of historical curiosity?
I have a lot of cigars from the mid-century. When I was buying a lot of vintage cigars, people would come to me, and I bought a lot of deals that had, countless boxes that are sort of from that period. And they have most have that like sandy Sumatra kind of wrapper that they use, and then a lot of local European tobacco. It's not stuff that's, aged particularly well. They're all super light, but some of the packages were interesting. I mean, in the United States,
work have been on these.
It's funny you asked that. Like in the US, the sort of golden age for cigar label art was around maybe 1905, might have been like the pinnacle. Once you got into the 20s or 30s, it was a lot less segmented of an industry. So you had bigger companies, consolidation was taking place. The labels were not as exciting. Even during that golden age, the European label subject matters were maybe not as interesting as the Americans, but the printing itself was even better. Particularly the Germans. They were making stone lithographs that were just completely mind-blowing. And when the war came around, and at that point, the Americans really were not making that exciting of stuff anymore. Europeans not from a printing perspective, but from a design perspective, still had a lot of interesting things. You know, there was sort of like weird even into the 1960s, there was interesting art coming out of Belgium, Holland, and Germany on cigar boxes. It was much more like modern art in a way, but at least they were doing some unique things still over there. Labels are not particularly valuable, but super interesting.
Even today, there's some interesting art projects coming up in the cigar industry, right? Is that something that you're fond of as well? Did you look into some of that? I think Drew Estate, in particular, had like even a sort of a house artist doing some of their designs.
We actually did something. We came up this year. I could show you some of them, or you can see them all on my Instagram or on our website. We wanted to have. I came out with a series of advertising signs, and we made 10 different signs. And the idea was that we wanted to have them all be in the style of different periods, but really look like they could be from the period, not just, in a certain style. And, when you think about old advertising signs, these were just a simple announcement of a product's presence, not a lot of information. And so we made 10 of these. And I may stop showing you these if this doesn't work out, but I'll show you a few of them. So, a first one, for example, this is classic Art Nouveau, more French Art Nouveau. Can you all see that all right? Yeah. So that was the first Art Nouveau sign that we made. This one is a classic American 1940s pinup style. Here's for Commonwealth, the cigar that I just talked to you about. We made a sign that's like industrial Art Deco. And then I wanted to have some that were much more European in style. So French Art Deco. And I didn't want to have all of the Art Deco to be too highbrow. So I wanted something that was a bit more American and a bit more approachable for your average consumer. So we made this one. This is like a 1920s American, very accessible. I mean, if you're looking at this, it's not talking down to you. Your average person would be able to see and appreciate and understand this, whereas some of the French stuff seems a little bit less concerned with your feelings and, if you get the style. But these are some of the ones that we came up with. I wanted a 1960s one, but unlike Angelique, which is very sort of stylized, I wanted something that was a little bit more playful. So this is 1960s, but a bit more fun. Anyway, so that was our art project as of late, and I hope to come out with another set of 10 of these things in the future.
Looks beautiful. Darren,
Thanks.
you mentioned a couple of projects that you have coming up, and before we wrap off, I really wanted to take a short glimpse into the crystal ball with you. What's in store for Principle Cigars and Darren Cioffi?
Well, the newest thing is the launch of Commonwealth, which will be happening imminently, as the cigars are now in the aging room in the factory. The other thing that we've come up with inside the Aviator series is something called Angel of Mercy. We've only made these in 2 sizes and they haven't been released yet. But the idea behind these cigars is that they're a charitable endeavor. So this is the pyramid. It looks like an Aviator, but the band is white. And the foot band has that little red mark on it. Angel of Mercy was the helicopter that would take the wounded troops during the Vietnam War. And the idea behind these cigars is that they're only going to be available in conjunction with a charitable endeavor. So they'll be donated to charity auctions or sold with different causes in mind. So we hope that they're going to be a great success and something that's sought after, but you don't pester me for them. You get to pester a charity for them. And we made another, this is the other format. It's more of like a Prominente. We haven't named the 2 Vitolas. We have to do that soon. This is the other one. So there's those. Angelique is coming out. We have a new Vitola for Frothy Monkey. We're launching a Mareva size Vitola, which is a little bit thicker than the existing one. And we're constantly trying to find a way to make more Night Flight, which is the Maduro Aviator. And I'm hoping that within the next year, we'll find a way to do that without sacrificing what goes into it.
Speaking of names and different Vitolas, Petteri had a question regarding Commonwealth and where the name came from.
It came from Petri directly.
Is there a story behind that?
I don't remember. I just remember that he came up with it. It was his idea. A couple of my friends have named things.
We were sitting at the Kirja Club in Helsinki when Darren was visiting, and
this was a long time ago.
This was about 6 years ago, maybe.
That's how long it took.
7 years ago. And you told about the idea of having a 10-country blend, and you need a good name for it. And we kind of went back and forth that one night, and I just somehow came up with the name of Commonwealth, and that stick. And then you just made the artwork, and that's been ever since. And I've been waiting very patiently for that to come out. So
I have about 4 of them here. Soon they'll be on the way. You love it. I love it. A lot of people hate that name.
I know. There's a particular Indian guy in Tallinn who hates it, at least.
Yeah, not a fan.
In general, how do you go about finding those names, either for new lines or for the Vitolas? I guess for the Vitolas, a lot of that is like old historical formats that you're looking into.
Sometimes I try to keep it within the framework of the branding, but not be too out on the on a ledge. Like, a lot of the aviator Vitolas are named in some way having to do with the French aviators. The French were great aviators. People don't realize how important they were in the early part of aviation history. And one thing that always strikes me is that, in the earlier part of the century, we were just barely getting planes in the air. They had invented these boxes that were, getting off the ground, kind of. And the French actually took the time to try to make them look pretty. They built planes with nice lines to them, and airships with beautiful curves, rather than just big balloons that were floating through the sky. And so I've taken some of the names of some of these airships, planes, some of the early aviators, and I've worked them into Vitola names for aviator series. Accomplice, we're a lot less fancy, and like I said earlier, I need to come up with names for the 2 Angel of Mercy Vitolas. So perhaps we'll hold a contest in the near future, and maybe the name can come from the public, because I'm out of ideas for that.
Darren, Guillaume just commented over on Facebook that Darren is a true France lover, almost more French than the French people are.
I'm just thinking the truth. I mean, can you imagine people are falling out of the sky left and right, and these guys are taking the time to make stuff look nice? I mean, it's either wonderful or it's a derangement, but they did it.
And probably enjoy a glass of wine on the side.
We named the Patria is one of their old airships. That's the Churchill and Aviator. We haven't launched it yet, but the next expanded aviator will be the Antoinette, which is a particularly beautiful airplane that they made around 1908, and that's our Lancero is the Antoinette. Anyway, there's a few others, but you get the idea.
Darren, it's been such a pleasure to share all these wonderful stories with you, and to dive a little into your historical interest and your passion, not just for cigars, but for the antiques, for all the old paper. And I truly enjoyed our session. Thank you so much for being on the show with us, and all the very best to you, of course, for the upcoming months, for that challenging time now. And yeah, like all the very best for your upcoming endeavors.
Thank you, Reinhard. The pleasure was absolutely mine. And thank all of you for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And I look forward to smoking with you in real life once again, once we get that going in the near future.
So do we. And please make sure to join us again. We've got some exciting sessions coming up. Tomorrow is a little special. We've got Florian Dubreuil, who is the 4th generation now of the house of Rémy Martin. So we will do some more French stuff tomorrow and taste some fabulous cognacs tomorrow at 7. And then Friday, we're back with Rick Rodriguez from CAO. And on Sunday, the professor, Jose Blanco, will be joining us. So a couple of exciting sessions ahead. Darren, thanks for tonight. It's been a blast. Very much enjoyed this session. Thanks for being on. And to all of you, stay safe, and we'll see each other again soon. All the very best. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.